Hi there, it's Kevin Ward with Yes Masters Real Estate Success Training, and I wanted to answer a question from one of my coaching members about an appraisal. And what do you do when an appraisal comes in low? Now, a lot of it depends on whether you're representing the seller or you're representing the buyer. And this video is specifically on when you're representing the buyer, what do you do when an appraisal comes in low on a contract that you have on a property. So here's the scenario from the agent. The appraisal came in $15,000 below the sales price. We were expecting it to come in lower than our offer, but not quite that low. But she says the appraisal is reasonable. We haven't submitted our repair request, which will be around $1,500. How's the best way to negotiate and handle this? Okay, so here's the deal. It says I'm going to be meeting with the buyer today, and then I'm going to be meeting with the agent after that. All right, so number one, the appraisal and the repairs are totally two separate issues. Now, the reality is $1,500 in repairs is going to come out of the seller's pocket, $15,000 below appraisal. Some of it's going to come out of the seller's pocket. So I understand that from the seller's perspective, it's going to be connected because it's all just simply dollars. So you got to be aware of that. However, they're totally two different things. An appraisal issue is determined by the bank. You can't really change the appraisal unless you want to challenge the appraisal or have another one ordered. However, when you're representing the buyer and it comes in low, you don't want to challenge the appraisal. It serves your buyer's best interest, and also the fact that it is a legitimate appraisal. And she said the appraisal is reasonable. In other words, the comps that they used were the right comps and so forth. So what do you do to handle it? Well, the first thing you always want to do is communicate with everybody. You want to give obviously your buyers, they either know about it before you, or if they don't, you want to make sure they know about it ASAP, and just let them know, hey, here's the deal, it came in low. Now, the good news is it gives us an opportunity to go back to the sellers and negotiate to get the sales price down. The bad news is if the sellers won't negotiate, you're going to either have to bring extra cash to the table, as up to $15,000, or back out of the deal. So you always come from this perspective. The buyers want to still buy the house. The sellers still want to sell the house, especially in this case where you had an idea that the appraisal was going to come in low. Now, anytime you know something is going to happen, you've got to be prepared for what happens when that does happen. It's just going to happen. And if you're buying a pre-owned home, you've got to expect there are going to be some repair requests. Sellers know that, or sellers may not know that, but the listing agents know that when you're representing the buyer. So you've got to be prepared simply to communicate and say, hey, we've got an appraisal issue. The first thing I would do is communicate to the listing agent and say, hey, as we were afraid might happen, we actually are looking at an appraisal issue. And so you may give them a heads up before you even get the appraisal. As soon as you find out there's an issue, you give the listing agent a heads up so that he can let the seller know. Now, here's the reality. It always comes down to leverage. Who has the leverage? Who wants to win? And so forth. If you bought this property in a multiple offer situation, then the seller has a little bit of leverage. In the fact that they could say, well, we're going to go for another offer. But typically, even if that's the case, people aren't going to want to pay above the appraised value. So then first step is you simply talk to your buyer and you say, here are the options, but here's the scenario. I'm going to suggest that we ask for the sales price to be reduced to the appraised value. Now, this is assuming that there is an appraisal contingency, or that the contract does allow for you to negotiate on a sales price based on an appraisal or loan contingency, which a loan contingency is an appraisal contingency because you can't get the loan if the house doesn't appraise, bottom line. So you simply make a counter or an amendment to the offer, lowering the sales price, the $15,000 in this case, whatever it is, below the appraised value. And then if you still need to ask for repairs, and this is where you talk to your buyer and say, hey, sellers are not going to be happy. You're going to get this house for $15,000 less than you're willing to pay. You're wanting $1,500 in repairs. Unless it's a lender required repair, eat the repairs. And make it so that it's, we're giving something here to the sellers. And so what you do is you send the counter or the amendment to the contract, depending on how the forms need to be done in your state. You send the contract over to the listing agent. Do not send anything blind. You never surprise the listing agent. You always let, anytime in negotiations, you always let the other agent know it's coming. Okay, now you don't have to give details necessarily. You can say, we're still talking about it. The seller, I'm still waiting for the buyers to make a final decision on this, but I wanted to give you a heads up that this is going to be, that we're dealing with some issues right here. And we don't want to muddy the waters. We still want this deal to work. However, based on the appraisal, the buyers are having to consider what they're willing to do, and so we're going to be sending over an amendment. I don't know what it's going to look like yet because I haven't got a final decision from my buyers what they're going to want, but it's basically going to be whatever they want to do. So I'm going to be talking to them, and we'll get that over to you as soon as possible. Have that conversation with the other agent. That way they're aware it's coming. They can prepare their seller for it coming, and so forth. Now, when you send it over, let's just do it this scenario. Talk to your buyer and say, okay, here's what I would suggest. Let's send it over, lower the sales price to $15,000 to the appraised value, and let's send over also the repair request. Now watch this. Send over the repair request or even the inspection report. I would send the inspection report over a lot of times. It has to be, the buyers have to be okay with it, but you send the inspection report and say, here's all the problems. We were going to ask for $1,500 worth of repairs. However, because of the appraisal issue, we're asking the seller to take a hit for $15,000 based on the appraisal. We're going to eat the $1,500 in repair. The buyers, not we, but the buyers are going to eat the $1,500 in repairs, and the buyers will take care of the repairs. And so what you're doing is you're letting them know, hey, I know this is painful for the sellers. We're willing to eat the repairs. Now, you send that over. Hopefully, and if you need to send the appraisal with it or the comps, at least that the appraiser used, so that the listing agent has some leverage to go to their seller with and say, hey, look, this is real. This is, if you turn this offer down and we put it back on the market, the next buyers, you're still going to have to deal with these comps, and they may get worse, not better. So, you know, it's the old rule of the bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. The best offer you have is the one you have right now. Best contract, best chance of getting a good sale. So that's the leverage you take. Now, with that, you've got to talk to your buyers now and say, if the sellers are not willing to come down, what are you willing to do? And then you just basically are going to end up negotiating, and buyers, you kind of meet in the middle on the sales price. Buyers are going to bring extra money to closing to make up for the difference in the appraisal, and so forth. But go in, you're going in strong. You're going in paying full market value for the property based on appraised value, at $15,000 below the original agreed price. So let's say it was $200,000, and now it's going to be $185,000. It's $185,000 based on the comps, as the market is saying is a fair price. You knew it, the buyers knew it going in, probably the sellers knew it, and the listing agent knew it as well going in. So you come with that. That's the target. That's the aim, and then you see what happens. And if the sellers are not willing to move, now you're just back to negotiating. Who's willing to give how much? If the sellers are not willing to move at all, now you got to say to the sellers, the buyers, are you willing to own a house at 5-10% above market value, whatever it happens to be? Are you willing to buy a house at that price? Is this the one you want? And if you don't get it, are you going to be unhappy about it? Obviously, you don't just give in. You still negotiate and work to find middle ground between the buyer and the seller if the sellers are not willing to come down the full amount to match the appraised value. But that's where I would try to go, is the appraised value. Now, on the seller side, if you're representing the listing agent, if you're the listing agent representing the seller, it's a little different angle, and it depends totally on the whether you have multiple offers or not, and so forth. But if you got a buyer, you're the buyer's agent, this will help you get it done. If you like the video, click the thumbs up, give it a like, make any comments, any questions you've got. I'd love to hear from you. Have an awesome day. Play to win. We'll talk soon.